Hello, everyone. It's midday on a Friday, and guess what? Guess what, Stephen?
My camera's working.
Your camera's working.
My camera's working. I
Oh, my word.
was just saying to you before we started, after the last farce, shall we say, 2 weeks ago, where I could not get the camera to sort of work. I've been testing the internet all week. It's all working at the right levels. Everything else I've done's okay. I just suddenly thought, what if it happens again? But it hasn't. So there's no freeze, there's no glitch.
Until the next door neighbour, who has been stealing Stephen's internet, starts playing on the Xbox again any minute now.
Yes.
Or other games machines are available, but Xboxes are very, very, very hungry on Wi-Fi. I've got a little story about that. We did an exhibition in the States one year, and everyone was demonstrating software. And the night before, everyone went in and they tested it all out, and it was all good or whatever. And then we discovered overnight that there was a Microsoft stand, and they put all of these Xboxes on, but they hadn't tested it the day before. Came to the first day of the exhibition, and Microsoft suddenly turned on like 20 different Xboxes and connected them to the internet, and nobody's software would work because the internet just went.
Right. So all just got drawn in by those pesky Microsoft Xboxes.
Yeah. Hi, Microsoft, if you're listening.
And if you've got any free Xboxes, we'd be more than happy to trial them.
Wonderful machines. Yeah. Oh dear. But I just end up playing the same old things on it.
Yeah.
You know, what's your favourite game on the computer?
Daley Thompson Decathlon. About 40 years ago. Come on, that's still got to be one of the favourites, hasn't it? So,
at this stage, I think I need to bring our special guest in today, who's Dan, who is it's a marvel that he's got here because he is coming from Scotland, and the weather there, as you may know, there's been a red weather warning, and it's been particularly awful. But he's managed it despite a lack of power, etc. So, welcome to Dan Glyde. Hi, Dan.
Hello, chaps. Yeah, it's quite amazing that I'm here. So the 4G mast up the road clearly is still working. I don't know for how long, so I may well drop off this call at some point. But yeah, so we've got no power, but luckily I got everything charged up because we were expecting this might happen, and we've got the wood burner on, so we've got heat, and I've got a big pot of water boiling away on top of that. So hopefully all will be okay. It is nuts outside. The trees in my garden are currently at right angles. It is crazy.
But there's at times like these when the old interweb gets interfered with by, let's say, an act of God, that you kind of reassess life again, doesn't you? Because you suddenly think, well, we can cope. We can cope without the internet.
Turns out it's all right. And the other thing is, but me and my wife have we've just been sat in the lounge in front of the fire, chatting away, listening to an audiobook and not doing much. And Julie turned to me, she said, there's some people that just wouldn't be able to do this. It'd be driving them nuts. We're very good. We've trained ourselves to rest and recuperate and to be able to sit down and do nothing. So, but it would drive some people up the wall. I know it would. But yeah, crazy times.
We'll talk about that in a minute. That's a good thing. Do you ever play computer games, Dan?
I don't anymore, Graham. No, I used to be heavily into computer games, and actually, when I worked for the BBC, I was a big advocate of esports and getting esports onto the BBC. They talked a lot about wanted to reach younger audiences, and I knew this was a way to reach younger audiences. So I directed the first ever live esports program on the BBC, and I got lots of coverage on, especially during lockdown when all the sports stopped. But yeah, as a youngster, I used to play a lot, mainly football games, I have to say.
The old FIFA.
Yeah, that's FIFA. It. Well, Pro Evo was my game actually.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. But yeah, I did like a game of FIFA too, and I do like a game of FIFA with my nephew when I go down and see him. He always beats me these days. I've lost all my hand-eye coordination.
I still like a game of FIFA. I get told by my youngsters that FIFA's pretty uncool.
It probably is. That's just
mate. Don't blame me. I'm not saying that.
Isn't it called something else now? Isn't it called FC or EA?
Well, because I think it got bought out, and they couldn't use the rights.
It's probably to do with FIFA saying you can't have the rights anymore.
Yeah.
Or no one wants to associate themselves with FIFA anymore. Maybe
possibly.
I'm just saying.
Could be, yeah.
There's that sort of thing. FIFA I still like, because I can half play it. Mario Kart I can do.
Mario Kart,
because you're sat down, you're in a car. It's not that. Although some of the tracks where it's like up in space and you can't hit the sides or whatever, and you just fall off.
Rainbow Road.
Terrible about those. That's it. Rainbow Road. Terrible at those. Whatever. Smash Bros or sort of like Mortal Kombat type things. I can have a go at those. Anything else, absolutely dreadful at, including Minecraft. I just end up looking at the sky, looking at the floor, not knowing where I'm going. And if I'm playing with my youngest, 2 minutes in and I'm dead. He's absolutely, he's got into a spacecraft or an aeroplane, whatever, gone into the sky, shot missiles at me. I'm gone. I don't know what's going on. It's complete chaos. But there you go. That's the beauty of being a dad, isn't it? When, as I was saying, and this is a good opportunity for Dan to introduce himself as well. I was saying on my poll this morning, Dan, I was talking about being cool and being cool as a parent and whatever. And actually, can we be cool as a parent? I'm really not sure. Is it actually our role to be cool? Or should we actually be a friend to our youngsters, or should we actually be a parent to our young people? Because that's probably more where I'm coming from, and therefore I'm not cool, and I don't want to be cool to young people. And actually, it's good that they differentiate their cool from my cool as well. And they don't even call it cool anymore; they call it fire. There you go.
Yeah, it's probably not even cool to say cool, is it, Greg?
It's not. It's totally uncool to say cool. But yeah, Dan, explain a little bit about yourself, what you do, and then maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. So these days, I'm a writer and a speaker, and I am a men's coach. So I work with guys, normally busy, kind of successful professional business owners and leaders, in and around midlife, so 35 to 65 my clients kind of are, and it's normally because their personal life success doesn't match their professional success, because their professional success has come at a cost, normally their health and their well-being or their relationships, and they come to me because they've suddenly gone, is this it? They feel a bit empty, maybe a little bit miserable, stuck. They're frustrated. There's no meaning, purpose, or fulfillment in their lives. And they've realized that the reason they wanted that success in the first place was in order that they had freedom, they had control, they had time with their families. And actually they found that they haven't got any of those things. So yeah, they come to work with me, and we get really clear on what they really care about, why they care about, and the why is really the important thing as well. And then we work on their views, opinions, and beliefs, and the junk that's below the surface that's tripping them up and getting them in the way, and telling them they should, have to, and ought to do this, that, or the other. And then once they've done that, that's when we then start doing goal setting and measures of success. And so I know myself, when I've done some kind of self-improvement programs in the past, they tend to start with the goals. But for me, if you haven't got clarity on what you care about and what it's all about, your goals are going to come from that should, have to, must place, and they're not going to last, because you're not going to have conviction. You're not going to be driven to do them. So that's what I do. And I also I do a lot of speaking as well. So I talk about men and mental health, and well, actually, I couch it as mental strength and emotional resilience, because I find men find that more interesting than mental health, and also about the kind of the old model of masculinity created by our culture, which has often led these guys to this place when they come to work with me, right? Because it happened to me in 2018. I burnt out. I had a massive panic attack one day, sat on my doorstep. I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was going to die. And that was life's way of pulling me up a bit lively and going, mate, you cannot continue to live like this. So I worked in broadcasting. I worked for the BBC. I did an amazing, fantastic job working in BBC Sport. I'm very passionate about sport. I'd have done the job for free. And, you know, the job already is hard enough. It is unsociable hours. It's long hours on big events. You do long periods of time without time off. But mostly it's a privilege to do. But my mindset was awry. So I got heavy imposter syndrome early in my BBC career and decided I had to be somebody other than myself in order to succeed. That was big mistake number one. That turned me, for the first time in my life, really, into a big people pleaser, somebody who said yes to everything. I thought that was how to get ahead. It absolutely wasn't. And what I found that, so after I burnt out, and I started to rebuild myself and my life and started a personal development and self-growth journey. And so I started to draw boundaries. I started to say no. Well, what happened was actually I realized that career wasn't my path anymore. So I stopped caring, right? So I knew it wasn't my future. So I stopped all the planning, the plotting and the scheming and the trying everything to get ahead. And something amazing happened. My value went up. I got promoted twice. I got opportunities I'd never got anywhere near in my career before. I got to direct network television programs. I got to direct live FA Cup matches, live Rugby League Challenge Cup matches, and all because I'd stepped into my power. I started prioritizing me, my health, my well-being, my relationships. They came before my career. So I started saying no, and my value just went up and up and up. So I was earning more money than I'd ever earned in my life before because I was saying no and I didn't care. Figure that one out, right? So yeah, and then so when lockdown came along, they offered voluntary redundancy at the BBC. I took it. I got a really good payout because I've been there a while, and I used that money to invest in myself. And I also got a really good career coach as part of the redundancy package, and that turned me on to coaching, because coaching for me is the quickest and best way to get ahead with your own self and personal development. And it's not just about skill set, it's about mindset, because mindset, your attitude, your point of view, that's everything.
Stephen.
I must ask Dan something before you ask me something. I must ask Dan something. Yeah. It really, when he started talking about his clients and what you said at the very start, Dan, would your clients be the people who you referenced at the start, who wouldn't be able to cope and wouldn't be able to sit there in front of the fire with an audience? That was the first thing that came to mind. Was it sounds like what you're able to experience is what your clients aren't able to do themselves.
Yeah, and I've been there, right? So before I burnt out, my mind would go 100 miles an hour. It was always telling me, do, more, achieve. And so I never sat still. I never got any rest and recuperation. And that's why I ended up burnt out, because I was in a high-powered career. It required a lot of commitment and a lot of hard work. And without the rest and recuperation, that was only ever going to lead one way. And I wasn't able to sit still. Even if I did sit still, my mind would be going 100 miles an hour. I'd be planning things for weeks ahead and strategies for this. And I couldn't keep still. I just couldn't. And therefore, I was constantly fatigued.
Yeah. It's very difficult to say no, though, isn't it?
It is, Graham, and especially when you're climbing a pole and climbing a ladder and trying to get ahead. Because you think, if I say no, that's going to reduce my value in people's eyes. Do you know what I mean? They're not going to come and ask me again if I say no, because I'm the man that says no. So I was the man that said yes. Can you do this bit of overtime, Dan? Yes. Can you work on your rest day, Dan? Yes. Can you stay on for a couple of hours this evening, Dan? Yes. But with no rest and recuperation, no switching off, no recovery, that drove me into the floor. And I know that it's difficult, and especially when we're kind and empathic people, because we want to help. And if somebody says, "Oh, I need your help," we go running, don't we? Even if we're pouring from an empty cup. Yeah. But it turns out, and what I've realized is that actually by saying yes, when every part of your being is screaming no, you're letting that person down. It's much better to speak your truth and say, do you know what? I can't right now. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. Let's figure something else out. Or is there somebody else that could do this? But I know how I really do know how difficult that is, and I appreciate it, which is why you've got to look below the surface at your views, opinions, and beliefs, and the stories you're telling yourself, because that is the stuff that you need to change so you can start drawing guilt-free, strong boundaries and protecting yourself, your energy, and your well-being, because you're no good to anyone pouring from an empty cup.
Big question then. Big question is, I understand how that works on an individual basis. If you've got a business owner and you're coaching them to do that, do we think that this can happen on a more organizational basis? And how do we start to do that? Because we need to do
it's
that,
culture, isn't it, Graham? It's about workplace culture. But it's about understanding in business. Now, I'm not a businessman, right? So I can't sit here and preach to people how to run successful businesses. You know, I run a thriving coaching business, but I'm a solopreneur. I can't tell people I know how to run businesses. There are far more clever people who know about business than me. So that's just put that qualification before I start saying this stuff, right? But I believe we need workplace culture now that puts people first. And I also believe when you do that, you will get a return on your investment. When you've got happier, more productive people with more energy and better health and well-being, that will affect the bottom line. You're not going to see that instantly. So you're not going to invest that and immediately see a 10% return as a businessman and an accountant, someone who's into financials. But what I think we've got to understand, and I think it's happening, Graham, more and more and more, I'm seeing it, businesses understanding that the best thing they can invest in is their people. So it's about recruiting the right people in the first place, and then having a culture where it's understood that the most productive people are well-rested people, are healthy, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally people. Not people who are running on empty, not people who are putting in 15, 16-hour days and wearing it like a badge of honor, not people who are pushing on and using caffeine and booze and whatever else to keep them going. That's not going to make for a long-term successful business. So it needs much more longer-term thinking, and it needs investment in people and proper investment in people. And it also needs trust and respect in people, because for me and for some of the bosses I've worked for in the past and that my wife has worked for too, there's this idea that everyone's taking the mickey, that everyone is trying to get away with doing as little as possible if they can. They're not. Yes, there are people that do that, and there are people that are unhappy in their job that do that. But if you've got a happy, healthy workforce that feels trusted and respected and valued, you will have a successful business.
The thing that ran through my mind, Graham, and it's probably going to be the same as you, is you go back a couple of years ago and we discussed that sort of, it wasn't an article, I guess it was just a piece of news at the time, which was the guy, was it Goldman Sachs or one of the big investment banks where, you know, people were doing, you know, they were earning astronomical amounts of money, but they were talking about some of their guys doing 80, 90, 95-hour weeks. Do you remember that? And
we've had it again this week, though, haven't we? We've had the you kind of tagged me into it earlier in this week. We've had, you know, the chief exec coming out and going, working from home isn't work.
Yeah,
you know, what's the matter with these people? Yeah,
they're dinosaurs.
Yeah,
20th century. It's the 21st century, guys. The 20th century's gone. Get busy living or get busy dying.
And if you look at the guy, I sort of read the article and I had an instant thought in my head as to what he would look like physically. What would, you know, and do you know how and it was what I thought it would be. It was a guy, I can't remember the exact age. He looked 55 plus, maybe 60, 65. It looked like someone, and that sort of business dinosaur sort of analogy, where someone who's sort of not in their 20s, 30s, 40s, where people are sort of understanding the benefits of it, but simply just throwing out there.
What you're saying, he was my age.
Well, yeah, I was trying to be kind, Graham. You know what I mean?
But he wasn't wearing a hoodie. So
exactly,
you know, I mean...
but it was a stereotypical comment from someone of a demographic. You just thought, actually, you've not thought about that. Then it got me thinking, why is he throwing that out there? What's behind all of that? What's prompted him? Is there a prompt in there? Is there a message? I just thought it was a really funny thing to sort of come out with after everything that's gone on and the way Dan's been talking about mental health and people health and productivity, to suddenly throw that in. I think everyone just turned around and was just scratching their heads going, where's that come from? It goes against everything.
That goes back to my old story about when I did an assessment on someone very high up in a certain bank, and the big problem that they had, they thought the big problem that they had was around their health, etc., was that everybody was telling them what to do, and they didn't want to do it because they're an important person. That wasn't the big problem. We've lost Dan, so we don't know. It could be the weather. Hopefully he'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
But the big problem was actually they never got out. They never got out from the four walls within which they were trapped. So whilst they thought they knew their business because they had all of this information about their business in front of them on a computer, and they were being passed reports about what was going on, they weren't spending enough time in front of the people that made up the business to actually know what was going on with the business. And this is the problem. And actually it was something that was being discussed on I'll give a little plug for this, the Guy Osmond podcast, which isn't out yet, so this is a little taster. But the next episode of the Guy Osmond podcast, you do need to tune into that, folks, because it's got some great guests on there. And part of the thing that we were discussing on there, well, I wasn't discussing, but the panel were discussing, is time. And the fact that we don't give people time in business these days, really important. Here he is. He's back again. We're just
sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Well, we're blaming the weather. There you go. But we're just talking about the fact that we just don't give people time, do we, in business at all? I mean, you mentioned right near the start of this, you don't have power at the moment. You can't log on to things and whatever else, etc. But just on a day-to-day basis, we don't give people time to breathe between meetings. We organize one meeting after another meeting. We give people a meeting, or we have a meeting with people. We set a load of actions points and whatever. We then don't give them time to think about any of those action points or what any of that meant or what their viewpoint is on it. So actually, I think what we're getting from people most of the time is half-hearted attempts at work. Because if you don't give people time to reflect and think and actually, absorb that into, their being and go, do you know what? Actually, now I've had time to think about it. All they do is they just go, knee-jerk response to everything. And
it stifles creativity, Graham, as well, doesn't it?
Incredibly.
Because you need space and time to be creative, and that's what I've realized. So I've now set up. I'm a very creative person. I love creating content. I love talking. But, in order to have these inspiration and these ideas and come up with these ways of doing things, I need time and I need space. So I've set up my whole life now to make sure I do. I work less hours than I ever have done because I know the best thing I can do is fill my cup. And to do that, I need time and space. And you're exactly right. Humans are just not meant to live at the pace that we're living at in the modern world. And there's only one way it's going to go, and it's going to blow up in our faces if we don't slow down and start giving people time and their lives back. It's all about economic growth and making money, which is fine. And I like that. I like ambition. I like drive. I like people who are creative and bold and take risks. And I think that should be rewarded. But we can't just keep flogging people to death all the time. It's short-term thinking. It will only last for so long. And that 20th century view, we know it doesn't work, which is why we're all changing, which is why the three of us are sat here having this conversation, which is why I earn a living from working with guys to get them more time back in their lives so they can get very clear priorities. What do I really care about? What do I want to put my attention on? And we should be doing that at work too. What really matters here is all this bureaucracy necessary? The BBC was so bureaucratic. There were layers and layers and layers of people who all their job was creating work for everyone else.
Yeah.
And
let's be fair to the BBC, though. I mean, just caveat that's the same in most organisations.
It's not just the BBC. I'm talking from my personal experience, and that's where I've worked until recently, the last 20 years. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure, and especially publicly funded organisations, I think that happens. But And so many times I'd be invited to meetings and think, I come out of the meeting and think that could have been an email.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's true. It's true. I think we waste half our lives in meetings if we're not careful, and we just have meetings to discuss meetings without any kind of action actually going on.
But that's the problem then, because then people haven't got time to do the job, and then they haven't got time to finish it at what it should be a reasonable hour, and therefore that pushes into and it sort of all feeds from there. The unnecessary meetings, the job then overruns. It pinches your time. Whether the relaxation time after work pinches time at the weekend, and that's where it starts from, isn't it? Really, is that unnecessary use of time, and it has to be taken somewhere, and it's taken off the relaxation, the recuperation.
Do you know where it starts from? It starts from, and Dan mentioned it earlier, it starts from lack of trust.
Yeah.
Right. If you take somebody on to do something and they're capable of doing something, you should just leave them to get on and do it. Right.
Yeah. And interfere if they're not doing it. Then intervene if they're not up to scratch. And I had a bit of a rant about this working from home on a LinkedIn post the other day, and it was from a boss who was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm getting everyone back into the office," and I said, "Why don't you trust them?" He said, "Oh no, of course I don't. It's not that. I trust. I want this, that, and the other." And I said, well, why can't you just employ people to do a job? Trust your recruitment process. Trust you've got the right characters in. Trust and respect people. Because what I know, in my experience, when you trust and respect people, they will trust and respect you. If you don't trust people, they won't trust you. So, it can be a vicious or a virtuous circle. And it starts at the top, doesn't it? If you trust your people, if people aren't performing, of course, you've got to retrain, you've got to intervene, you've got to have a process, but only then intervene. Don't be micromanaging and having constant meetings to check that people are doing what you think they should be doing. And that's what, for me, that's what this get people back to work business is about. It's because those old school 20th century leaders do not trust their workforce.
I'm going to say it's slightly more complex than we think, though, because, and I was thinking about this yesterday while I was listening to this other conversation. I understand that there's a trust level thing going on from management down, but I think part of the problem and part of the reason that, we're having so many conversations about this is it's a bit like when years ago when we had smokers at work. We don't tend to have this in the same way these days, right? I mean, we still have people that vape, etc. But do you remember we used to have so many conversations around? Well, the smokers have gone out; they're getting a break now.
Yeah.
Right. So they're look at them. It's all right. They get 20 minutes there and 20 minutes there to go and have. I don't get 20 minutes there to do that. I don't get it. Some of it comes from those interpersonal relationships at the same level on the floor, as it were, of the office or whatever, where it's, especially now that we're trying to be more diverse and more inclusive and whatever, and it's like, well, I know James has got ADHD, but he's gone off to that room to have a bit of time in that room. I'm here. I'm sat here. I'm doing this, right? Why don't I get why don't I get that? Why don't I do this? And the problem is that the conversations aren't being had at that level either. These people aren't getting to know each other properly. There's not a real understanding there.
Yeah, that's the word. It's understanding, isn't it? That's what's required, and that's why at the very start we said this is a culture thing, and that culture has to come from the top. But also, we've all got to be a bit more understanding. We've all got to be a bit kinder, and that kind of view, right? That comes because, and again, it's a trust thing. People don't trust themselves. People aren't kind to themselves, and you will treat other people how you wish to be treated, right? So if you don't trust yourself, you don't like yourself, you won't trust other people either. So I used to be one of those smokers, Graham, that used to go outside for 5-10 minutes, and I had some of my best ideas when I was out having a cigarette with a couple of my mates. And yeah, we'd come back and some people would whinge us. Oh, it's all right for you, isn't it, going out for 5-10 minutes? It's like, we're smoking here if we could, but you won't let us.
But Stephen, let's pull this back into your world a minute as well. You know, when you go in and you talk to companies about, you know, perhaps putting in some adjustments around, you know, physical posture and what, you know, how people can reduce the burden on the body, etc., at the desk and whatever. And then you mention things like your software and work and move, and they go, oh, but it's time, isn't it? I can't take the time. I can't stop and move and change things on my desk or get off and exercise or whatever. But clearly there's something going wrong there, isn't there, between what we know on the one hand actually works. Give people time to think, give people time to move. They are actually more productive. We've got a massive problem really with presenteeism, that people are just turning up for work and then just zoning out because actually, you know, they're on the verge of burnout and whatever. And yet there's still a reluctance to accept this, you know, advice that you actually need to just stop from time to time during your day and do nothing, because you're not doing nothing. In the nothingness, you're doing something. This thing is still working.
Yeah. It reminds me, and I think we may have spoken this previously off air, Graham, about it, but an example where we did present our software to a customer, and the idea was behind our software, Dan, for yourself, is it's all about making sure people take breaks. So they're prompted to take breaks. They're prompted to alternate between sitting and standing if they've got the ability with a sit-stand desk, and you know, just moving away from the device for a few seconds, you know, on a regular basis. And they love the software, but they were concerned people were going to take too many breaks. And it was like, but that's the idea of it. The idea is that people take breaks to become productive. And I think that was almost into that. And I just checked whilst we were chatting. I think it was Lord Rose was the name of the guy who sort of came out with that comment. I think it was Monday or Sunday this week. Is just that they clearly don't trust their staff. That they must recognize that to be more productive and produce a higher quality of work, people need to take breaks, but they didn't trust them to take breaks. And it's almost a bit like that working from home. We don't trust them. We were like, well, hang on a second, it's going to benefit you, but you're concerned people take too many breaks. And you think, well, you can't help someone really with that attitude and that approach. It's just, that's, as you say, culture was the word we spoke about. If you don't trust people to take breaks that they need, they're going to benefit the company. What can you do about something like that?
And Stephen, and then when you get that culture, you end up like me at the BBC, a people pleaser, right?
Yeah.
So you won't take your break because you think, oh, actually, the boss is not going to look favourably upon me if I take my break here. Oh, actually, I'm not. I need to get. I've got all this list of things to do, and for me, it's about priorities. And again, this has to come from the top. What's the priority here? Is the priority for everybody to be fit and well and as productive as they can be and doing good output, not just output, but good output? Or is the priority just to do? Because that's the world we've come from, isn't it? And it comes from industrialization. It comes from people working in mills and factories, and we still have that very Victorian attitude in our workplaces. It's so 20th century, and it's so counterproductive.
I think we've talked about this as well before, Graham. I also think email's got a big part to play in all of this. Email's a way of just overwhelming people with almost like a to-do list in front of their eyes. People get a task and just push it down the line, and all you then do is create people having inboxes, email, and you create that to-do list almost in front of their very eyes. And then almost they think, well, actually, I need to get that done, so I'm just going to just fire it off, not thinking about the quality of the response, but just that I need to get that gone. I need to get, and then therefore everyone starts doing it to each other, and we all start filling each other's inboxes, and we all get overwhelmed, and we go, what do we do? Well, I just got to get rid of it.
I was going to say, I think Dan commented on a comment that I made on someone else's post about this the other day, because on LinkedIn, because they were saying, you know, this is the start of people not being able to escape and you know, constantly being having their time eroded and whatever. And I said, no, this goes back a long, long way, because, you know, but basically we used to live in a time where if you needed to get a message to somebody, you had to literally get on the back of a horse
yeah,
and go for miles across the land, you know, and whatever, and then knock on their door and then go, here's the message, or whatever. That it actually started with technologies like the telephone. That's where it started. As soon as we had telephone, we could call somebody, right? We then had my generation, our parents. We grew up with our parents having pagers. Remember pagers? Yeah. My dad had a pager. He'd go to work. I can remember when he proudly brought home his first pager, etc. And I was like, oh, that looks cool. You know, what does it do? Oh, it dings if like somebody needs me and whatever. And I was thinking, God, that's amazing. That's brilliant. Until I realized, like, we'd be sat around the table at night or whatever, having tea, and it's like, oh, your pager's gone off. The first few times it's quite, you know, wow, that's great. After a while, it's a bit trying, isn't it? It's like, oh, sorry, I've got to go and sort this out now or whatever. And you think, this is taking dad away from me. This is taking time away from the family or whatever. You know, and it just continued from there. Fax machines. It's like, oh no, I don't have to write a letter and put it in the post anymore. No, I can actually just like send it through this machine and it receives at the other end. And I know they've got it because you've got a send receipt. All of those technology. I mean, it's just a long history now of us knowing that someone else is there, knowing that it's off of our plate and onto somebody else's plate. And that's all we're doing all of the time, is we're trying to interrupt, and another one of Dan's words, we're trying to interrupt other people's boundaries. And that's why it's so important to get back to boundaries, isn't it? And say, I'm not looking at that.
Yeah. And that's how I live now, Graham. I only look at emails at certain times of day. I'll only take calls at certain times of day. I run a WhatsApp group, right, which is constantly pinging, but I will only look at that at certain times of day. I'm not always 100% disciplined at that. I do occasionally break my own boundaries, but I do that consciously, and because I'm making a choice and because there's something particular going on. But I've deliberately set my life up that way, because otherwise you're always on, aren't you? You're always on, and everybody expects everything now. So all of my clients, I tell them, I will get back to you within 24 hours. I guarantee that. Most of the time I'll respond straight away, but it will be within 24 hours, because there are times a day where my phone goes down and it goes away and I'm no longer always on. I can't be, because it takes my energy. It'll make me a worse coach if I'm using my energy up, always being on. And that's where I'd got to before I reached burnout. I never, ever switched off. I remember being on a luxury, all-inclusive holiday to Mauritius, laying on the beach, and my wife looking at me going, what are you doing? I was answering work emails. Mental. Crazy. Yeah. What was I thinking?
It happens.
But Graham, going back to what you said, it's great, all this technology. It's the people who are using it that's the problem. It's the people. It's
never
the people
technology's fault. It's never technology's fault.
The people who impinge on the boundaries. As Dan said, Dan called himself out. It wasn't the technology. It was the fact he couldn't leave that bit of technology alone, or as you say, WhatsApp groups and emails and all that sort of stuff. The technology is great. It's how the people use it, or actually know when to not use it. That's the thing, and that's probably a cultural thing. Is it appropriate for me to WhatsApp someone about something at work after 5:30 or 6:30, or can I go 7:30? And that's the thing. It's that culture and those boundaries that mean the technology is great within an agreed framework. Once it goes outside of that, it just runs amok.
And we kind of greenwash it a little bit these days by doing things like saying we'll send someone a message at 11 o'clock at night, and we'll go, now I totally understand if you're not going to look at this at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
because it's okay, and I understand that, you know, different people are different, and it's okay, and you know, I wouldn't expect to be looking at this at 11 o'clock at night. So if you're not looking at this at 11 o'clock at night, it's fine, knowing full well that person's got the kind of brain that's going like, oh, I've seen it.
Yeah.
you know,
got to do something
and
with
let's bring neurodiversity into this. You know, some neurodiverse brains in particular, if they've seen that ain't going away from the brain. That's them thinking about that all night now. If they haven't dealt with it, that's really unfair to send that in the first place. Yeah,
and it messes up that person's sleep, and therefore their productivity the following day or days is impacted by the fact someone couldn't resist. They could have hung on till 8 o'clock the next morning, but they had to just get that message out there.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think if it'd be great. I mean, it'd be great if people like, you know, from the top would have coaching from people like Dan, and then get that headspace right for themselves in the first place. But then if they could mirror that going down as they grew their organizations, so that they go, do you know what? If I'm only going to have 5 things in my task list today, because 5 things is enough for me, and that's fine, I'm not going to expect Jimmy there to have 20 things in his task list, because I'm just going to shove my extra things over into Jimmy, and then Jimmy's going to shove his extra things over into James, and he's going to shove his extra things over into Janet, so that, you know, by the time you get somewhere down the line, somebody sat there going, I've got too much to do. You know, it would be fair if people started with that right from the start and go, do you know what, folks? Going to make sure that everybody here is happy with the amount of work that they've got to do today, and actually if we get this little bit done, that's fine.
And that's what leaders are like, Graham. You know, some of the guys that I work with, I tell them at the start when they start working with me, I'm going to help you achieve more by doing less. They look at me like I'm crazy. What? I'm going to help you achieve more by doing less, by understanding, I'm going to use a horrible phrase, but I can't think of anything else but understanding what moves the needle forward. So busyness does not equal productivity. And I've worked with a ton of busy people who didn't do F all. But the bosses loved them because they were always there. They were there 9 hours a day. They were always at their desk. They always looked like they were doing anything. They're not moving the business forward. They're not doing anything. They're just being busy. So, and yeah, I've worked with guys who run small, medium businesses, and they've realized that they can then pass that down. They can then take that and that become their workplace culture, that they're constantly reviewing activity. Is this moving the needle forward? Is this bringing in revenue, or is it just pushing paper around and creating meetings for the sake of it? And it's you know, it's that thing of not just doing things the way we've always done them, asking questions. Does this work? Is this going to make us money? Is this going to push us forward? And the same in your personal life. Is this going to improve me? Is this going to push me on? Is this going to make me, my family, healthier and wealthier? If not, why are you doing it? Why are you putting your attention on it? Why are you spending your time, energy, effort, and money on doing things that are not productive?
Yeah, no, totally. I think when we talk about ergonomics, Stephen, you know that a lot of people will just go, "Oh, ergonomics, it's about those mice, isn't it?" I mean, which for you it is.
It is.
You know, you do. You sell mice and laptop stands and things like that. But ergonomics is also about process. You know, I wonder how many companies truly look into the way that they do stuff and go, that's got a lot of moving parts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why's it got so many moving parts then? Why are we doing that, then that, then that, then that? It's because someone at some point thought that was a really great idea.
A lot of the time it's putting a sticky plaster over something, isn't it? And you know, it's actually just dealing with those issues as and when they come. It's the reactive and not proactive piece, isn't it? Is that people don't really try and get to the root of the problem. They just try and cover up those little issues, where actually if you got to the root of the problem, could it have a benefit for lots more people and lots more parts of your organization? But that, as I say, it's that can be the thing. Is just they need to see a little bit wider than rather just one or two certain instances of things happening, and where could they improve it wider.
Sorry, Stephen, and noticing the interconnected nature of everything. I think we have this thing in our culture where we silo things, don't we? And we deal with things in isolation. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything exists in relation to something else. And there's a friend of mine, a guy called Richard Galbraith, who's a systemic coach. He is genius at this stuff, who goes into workplaces and gets leaders to understand this department's connected to that department. When this person does this, it affects this, it affects this, it affects this. And it's being able to take that wider view, both in your personal life and in your business, of understanding it's holistic. And you know, Stephen said a great word there, root causes. This is the thing. We're infected by short-term thinking. So we deal with symptoms, and we paper over the cracks, and we deal with the symptom. We go, oh, that symptom's gone away, and we've set a system up in order to do that, without looking at what else that's affecting. What's the vision here? What's the long-term goal? What are we trying to achieve? And again, in both professional and personal circumstances, you know, people work hard on their physical health sometimes, but if you've got terrible mental and emotional health, it's going to affect your physical health. So it doesn't matter how many ice baths you have, how much carbs you cut out of your diet, you're not going to be well unless you're also working on your mind and your emotions and your spirituality too.
Yeah, no, that's true. And kind of going back to the beginning there, you know, if you're you know, crushing those 16-hour days, you know, 8 or 9 days a week, you know, then, you know, you might be at your physical peak, but your mental health is probably absolutely on the floor, isn't it? You know, it's been a great conversation. Dan,
thanks, Dan.
You need to have a word with your friend there. It'd be great to get him on here. I think that would, it would be really great to have a conversation.
I'll connect you with him, Graham. He's a really interesting guy, actually. Yeah, he is. He's a very smart guy, and he used to be an actuary, and he's done all sorts of interesting things. I will connect you with him. Yeah, I think you could have a really interesting chat.
Stephen, just kind of tie this all together today.
Yeah.
Do you think that, or are you seeing that guys that are out there on, you know, your side of things, on the ergonomic side of things, going into businesses, are they beginning to have these deeper conversations about process and you know, what's actually going on with companies?
I think the sort of the word or the area that they've got into, something we've touched on, is around sort of neurodiversity. That's the thing that I've noticed a lot more when I'm talking to people who are going out doing assessments, and Dan used the word silo there. They're not just looking at and let's break it down to sort of raw ergonomics that I would look at. They're not just looking at the physical setup of somebody's desk and their laptop and all that. They're actually the conversation's broadening, and, you know, mental health, but also particularly neurodiversity, something that's really being looked into. So and again, going back to the word Dan said around holistic, it's great that the whole assessment side, the companies who, when they are assessing individuals, are looking at it much broader and much deeper, not just looking for that little thing, but what are those different interconnecting reasons that could explain why someone is having a challenge in the workplace. So that's the encouraging thing for me, is people are recognizing it and broadening up the scope of the assessment or the conversation they're having with that individual to try and identify.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it just needs to maybe widen even more.
Yeah.
And start to really look at, you know, as we were talking about there a minute ago, and as Dan was talking about, you know, where's this happening in the processes? Are departments within an organization actually talking to each other? Maybe it just needs to go into the culture element of it that little bit more, because ultimately, unless you change the culture, the rest of it is going to be only sort of sorting it out over here.
Yeah
You know, and it's not necessarily going to make that grand difference across the whole organization. It needs somebody to go, stop.
Yeah.
As Dan said, how we're working at the moment just isn't working, folks. We're all just busy bees. We're doing too much for too little, and we need to reassess this. Yeah, because otherwise we're all going to burn out, and that's not really helpful to anyone, is it? No. And then we can't really be there for the clients or our customers or for each other. And then, you know, what's the point of life? There you go. We got deep there today, folks. There you go.
Point of life. There you go. There's a question for the list.
Yeah.
Always look on the bright side of life.
There we go.
As they say. We'll be back again. Thanks to Dan
Thanks,
so
Dan.
much for coming in, making it through the storm, as it were. And we'll be back again, same time, same place next week. So do stay tuned for that. You can catch up with previous episodes of this at ergonomics.com. We'd love to hear your conversation. So, do join in whichever platform you hear this on. If you've got a question, put the question in there. We will answer it. Until next week. Bye for now.
Bye.